I talk about ESPN a lot on this channel. And last week, they were talking about Baker Mayfield, and they've been making segments on their talk shows, for weeks going on. I remember seeing one a month ago, and I'm starting to notice that they're starting to sow the seeds for a new narrative about Baker Mayfield. And honestly, if you think I'm just seeing things, just look at the title of this video and tell me what storyline they're going for, right? But another thing I noticed that was a little bit more interesting than them trying to set another new narrative for Baker Mayfield was that in this video, you can kind of see the flaw with ESPN's current hiring strategy when it comes to talent. And I'm not saying that the problem is that they hire former players. A lot of the time, former players are some of the most interesting voices and minds on that network. Shannon Sharpe is somebody on FS1, Jalen Rose, Dominique Foxworth. There's a bunch of guys out here who used to play pro sports who are the most interesting thing in the coverage of that sport on that network. So I'm not saying that the former players are necessarily a problem. I know a lot of people complain about that. I don't think that's an issue. You usually get some insight, and if you don't, you get something entertaining at the very least. Now, ESPN's biggest problem, in my opinion, is that they have this bad habit of hiring herbs. Now, for those of you who don't know what a herb is, a herb, for all intent, change, and purposes, is a schmuck. Someone who offers nothing interesting, new, fun, or thought-provoking. They just give you these bland, unseasoned, dry chicken breast takes. Again, lazy, nothing interesting, no sauce, no seasoning, just herbs. And that's why they're herbs. And if ESPN would just stop hiring herbs, it'd actually be an entertaining network at the very least, and it might actually be a good network. But they just can't stop themselves from hiring these herbs, these former general managers or head coaches who just have nothing interesting to add. They've never had a personality when they play. They didn't have a personality when they were involved in the game. They were always anti-personality. Now you're paying them to be a personality, and they're just bland. They have nothing interesting to add, and the game has honestly passed a lot of these guys by, but they're the only people representing their leg of the game that's on TV, and they just hold the game back because they just want the game to be what they remember it to be, but it's just the game's moved on. And ESPN has a new hire. His name is Mike Tannenbaum, and boy, if this isn't the prototypical 6'5", big arm bust of a herb that ESPN loves to hire, then I don't know what is. That former head coach, general manager I was talking about, and he is a former GM. He used to be the GM of the Jets, and I believe he had a front office role for the Dolphins. They had him on ESPN's morning show, Get Up, and he said something that I don't just disagree with. I'm not going to make a video talking about somebody just because I disagree with him, but I just thought it was just lazy and kind of exposed how bad these herbs that ESPN hires are compared to everybody else that they hire. So let me roll the clip.
Required reading this morning from ESPN.com's Bill Barnwell, who writes, "This is a critical year for Mayfield. It's not out of the question that this could be his last season as Browns starter if he continues to struggle. It seems crazy to imagine him going from toast of the town as a rookie to fighting for his job in year 4, but the Bears went from thinking Mitchell Trubisky was a franchise quarterback to turning down his 5th-year option a year later. The Browns will have to decide on Mayfield's 5th-year option next spring, and if he disappoints for the second straight campaign, it's not going to be an easy call." Get my crew back in here. Let's start with my general manager, Mike Tannenbaum. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. This is a critical year for Baker Mayfield because his timeline isn't the same as Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski is in year 1. He will be there for a while. And Baker Mayfield has a bad habit of drifting to his right. And when he does that, that's when bad things happen. He has to step up into the pocket, and he has to be much more productive and smart with the football, Greeny. And when you look at guys like Josh Rosen, short leash in Arizona, he's gone. Trubisky, was mentioned, the option was an exercise. I think that's going to be the new normal in the NFL, where these younger quarterbacks get shorter leashes. You could look at Joe Judge with the Giants. You could go to Washington with Ron Rivera. Those young quarterbacks could be in peril. So this is a hugely consequential year for Baker Mayfield.
First off, anybody who mentions Baker rolling to his right as this inherently negative thing, as if him rolling to the right is always bad, is just being lazy. They're just repeating things that they heard people say when things were going bad for him and just regurgitating them without putting much thought in the noggin when they transfer it over. Because if anybody would think, and these are professionals in football, they know better, but they just aren't thinking about it. Because if anybody would actually think about that ideal, right, that rolling to your right is just inherently bad no matter who you are, and that it's a bad habit that all quarterbacks should break, then that would be pretty stupid compared to every other quarterback in the NFL. Russell Wilson rolls to his right. He's fine. Aaron Rodgers rolls to his right. Not a bad habit. Big Ben is most dangerous when he breaks the pocket, rolls to his right. Any Browns fan who has watched any Browns Steelers game knows that once the fat guy chases Ben to the right side of the pocket, that's usually when he finds Antonio Brown on a post route for a touchdown. It's just ingrained to my head. So I know rolling to your right is not inherently bad. It's up to the offensive coordinators and the head coach to build in things to kind of take advantage of if you have a quarterback that's going to break the pocket, make sure you have some routes that are going to be available there. This was done excellently in 2018 when Freddie Kitchens was the first-time offensive coordinator and done very poorly in 2019 under Todd Monken and Freddie Kitchens. This is not something that Baker has to fix inherently because he rolled to his right. And also, he had bad offensive lines all year. It's just something that has to be adjusted to. Any quarterback that's right-handed, if the pocket breaks down, they're gonna roll to their right because they're right-handed. That's the easiest way to get out of the pocket. You're not gonna turn around and go left because it's not right. Right? Also, I don't think the comp on Mitchell Trubisky that everybody is loving to throw out there is accurate. People forget that just because the Bears went 11-5 with Trubisky, that doesn't mean that people were necessarily convinced that Trubisky was a franchise quarterback in any moment of his career because his play never reached that. He never had a single season in his career as good as Baker Mayfield's rookie year. So comparing Baker Mayfield to Mitchell Trubisky is kind of a false equivalency because if Mitchell Trubisky gets beat out in Chicago this year, it's because he had 3 bad years in a row as a starter and then got challenged. Baker Mayfield has had 1 bad year. He's not on the same playing field as Mitchell Trubisky. This is a guy who almost won Rookie of the Year his first year. Mitchell Trubisky never came close to anything like that. So comparing him to the Mitchell Trubisky situation, I just feel like it's just wrong and another type of lazy, but I get the overall sentiment of what people are trying to go for, that Baker Mayfield is going to have to play well this season. So does every other quarterback in the NFL, but I get what they're trying to say. I just would make the distinction that Mitchell Trubisky is somebody who was always seen, no matter at what point in his career, as somebody that you would have to carry defensively and with offensive pieces around him. Baker Mayfield at one point looked like he could be a game changer at the position of quarterback, and at no point did we think that about Mitchell Trubisky. I don't think it's a fair comp. Mitchell Trubisky's been pretty vanilla for 3 years. Baker had 1 bad season. It's not the same situation. Also, he says this thing about the new normal being short leashes on quarterback, and it's just like, does this guy watch football? Like, he was in the league 2 years ago, and then he says something like that, which is just questionable because short leashes have always existed for some quarterbacks in certain situations, but it's always kind of understood if you draft somebody number 1 overall that you probably aren't going to give them a short leash on year 3 just because they had 1 bad season when they had a good season in the first year. Jared Goff, for example, is not on a short leash in LA, but he was bad last year. It took Mitchell Trubisky 2 straight years of being mediocre to get this quote-unquote short leash that he's going to have this season. I just find it hard to believe that the Browns are going to give this guy a short leash after 1 bad season when the circumstances were quite honestly understandable. You had Freddie Kitchens, bad offensive line. These were all understandable reasons on why he wasn't as successful as he was his first year. Not excuses, but reasons. By the way, this is Mike Tannenbaum, the same guy who gave Mark Sanchez a ridiculously long leash in New York and then went to Miami and gave a really short leash to Ryan Tannehill. And how did that work out for them? You tell me. So I just don't know if he even thinks about what he's saying. But I got to give people credit where credit is due. And I think that the rest of the panel in this conversation actually did a fairly good job of kind of calling out Mike Tannenbaum on some of the BS. And let's just play that here.
And I agree that Baker should be on the hot seat and they should be considering moving on from him if he has another bad season. But they need to make sure that they watch the film and understand what's his fault and what's not his fault. Because while Mike T says he should step up in the pocket, there was not a pocket to step up into many times last year. And another issue that they had was the coaching, obviously. What you do to build a good offense in this league is you get really, really good at one thing first. And then the defense has to adjust to stop that one thing, which compromises the defense and makes everything else an opportunity, or makes more opportunities for you to make big plays. They didn't do that last year. If you watch their games closely, they don't seem to have much of an offensive plan. And I guess that's part of the problem when you have so many great players is you're just running plays for guys. You're not building an offense necessarily. So at the end of this season, if Baker has a poor season, I think it's important to understand why he has a poor season, because I don't know that it was all his fault last year.
Go ahead, D-Wood.
Well, I think that's the reason why you bring in Kevin Stefanski. If you look at what he did for the Minnesota Vikings last year, they became a run-centric offense with Dalvin Cook. And look what that did for the Minnesota Vikings last year. And I think that's the reason why he's in Cleveland this year. You got Nick Chubb, who's the second leading rusher in the National Football League. This is a team that's probably going to run the ball first. They're up the young quarterback. Now, if Baker Mayfield can't make things happen, can't correct some of the errors of his ways from last year, then that brings serious questions as if this guy's going to be the long-term solution at the quarterback position.
I don't disagree with that. I can't sit here and tell you that I know or even think Baker Mayfield is going to become a great quarterback. But what I can say, Mike Tannenbaum, to you is I think there's a difference between excuses and reasons. Some things are excuses, and other things are reasons why things go wrong. So if the New York Giants, by hiring a new coach, or if Washington, by hiring a new coach, decide after 1 year that they are ready to move on from their quarterbacks, that means A, they really weren't that committed to the decisions they made organizationally in the first place, and B, it strikes me as a really lousy way of doing business. This is a developmental position, and I don't think a quarterback can necessarily, you can say, look at a guy after 2 years and say, that's it, he's never going to be what we use the #1 pick in the draft on. That strikes me as a very questionable way to go about this.
It's almost jarring to watch such good sports talk and solid analysis happen on ESPN, but there were fair and very good points made by all three outside of Mike Tannenbaum. Now, again, I disagree with the whole narrative being pushed here that Mitchell Trubisky and Baker Mayfield are somehow equivalent, when if you look at what the two have accomplished in the years they've been in the league, they're just not. Sure, Baker Mayfield played Mitchell Trubisky level last year, but his first year was light years above anything Mitchell Trubisky's ever done as a quarterback in the NFL. I think there's just vast differences between the two. I think Baker's more capable, so I disagree with that narrative. But I do agree that Baker's going to have to play better in 2020 than he did in 2019. I think that's obvious. This team is not trying to go 8-8 or sneak into the wild card. This is a team that's obviously trying to make a run for, something memorable, maybe a playoff win, maybe an AFC championship, Super Bowl, who knows? It seems like they're trying to make that push. And anything below that, especially if Baker Mayfield does have over 20 interceptions and they're not reaching their goals, then you can start to look at Baker Mayfield sideways and see what you're going to do with him going forward as his rookie deal is going to end. But as far as comparing him to Mitchell Trubisky, I think that's a little bit ridiculous. But we'll see. We'll see. I might be wrong on that front. But let me know down in the comment section below what you think. Do you think Baker Mayfield and Mitchell Trubisky is a fair comparison? Or are you more along the lines of what I'm thinking? Let me know down in the comment section below. But again, guys, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. And again, guys, have a great day. Have a good night.